Okay, so the first thing that you mentioned was you have to like develop a zero tolerance for fear, which you kind of covered earlier on. But can you go a bit deeper on that and explain how exactly you were able to do this or how people can do this?
Okay, I think I think the most common misunderstanding when it comes to controlling your emotions and your mind is that it's difficult, and people think, yeah, I tried it once or twice or three times, but it just didn't work for me. And that's like saying, yeah, I went to lift weights three times, and I didn't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger on his good days. And no, that takes a bit more effort than that. And it does take
Yeah.
persistence and effort. And the gains are incremental and slow. But this was my thinking. You know that sometimes when you have an older couple and one of them passes away, the other one will often pass away very quickly. Not because they were necessarily sick, just emotionally they gave up, and then things happen. And I really believe that the happier you really are emotionally, the healthier you are. The
Yeah.
less isolated you feel, the healthier you are. The less fear you have to live with, the healthier you are. So I was very, very invested in being as happy as I could. And when I had thoughts of what would happen with my daughters if my two young daughters back then, if I pass away, or I'll never get to see this, or I'll never get to see that, and it's very difficult to be happy when those thoughts are intruding every conscious moment, at least at the beginning. So the first thing I decided was every time I those thoughts intrude and I can't stop them from intruding, I will do something about it. And what I did was, it's very simple. We actually cannot think about two things simultaneously. We can quickly switch between them, but we can't
Yeah.
think about two things simultaneously. So I can't stop bad thoughts from entering my mind, but I can try and replace them as quickly as possible with other thoughts. And I would literally decide every morning two things I would focus on. I'll explain them both in a second. The first one was what happy thoughts I was going to try and focus on the minute bad thoughts entered my consciousness, wherever that would happen. So, for instance, the best times I have in my life is with my wife and my two daughters, and we love going abroad on trips. So I would decide in the morning where abroad are we going to be going, and I would actually try and play out in my mind every step, literally every step of the journey, getting into a
Wow.
cab, driving to the airport, what we would talk about, and focus as hard as I could on
Mm.
that. And at the beginning, it's very difficult to focus on it when other thoughts are coming in, but I would stay with it as much as I could. And after a while, you keep on the narrative. If it's a good enough one, and I got to choose, so I chose good ones for me. So if the narrative is good enough, then you're focused on that narrative, and you get rid of the bad thoughts. And even if they come back in 2 minutes, I'm back to the narrative. So I would think about positive narratives I could replace and focus on to replace the bad thoughts. And the second thing is that simple like arithmetic, you have to concentrate on just a bit. Uh, Start from 1,000, take off nine, and say it out loud. 991, 982,
Mm.
and do that. Now it's different. You need to
Interesting.
focus to do that. So you don't, it's difficult to think about bad things if you're actually focusing on the next number and saying it out loud. That's what worked for me. I was coming up with every strategy I could think of,
That's
not to stop bad thoughts, but to replace them as quickly as possible. And I could be in the middle of talking to someone or eating, but I would stop and do that. And it took me a few months, but after a few days even, I was getting better at focusing on my thoughts. And after a few weeks, I was getting the time it took me to focus on them and get rid of bad thoughts just shortened. And after a few months, I would have bad thoughts, but they wouldn't be linger for more than a second before I just got rid of them. And I maintain that today because I'm still
wow.
supposed to
That
have incurable. cancer, so I can have bad thoughts every now and then, but I will never entertain them. And it doesn't matter if they have anything to do with cancer or anything else. I do not entertain bad thoughts. If there are things I need to problem solve about, problems, then I don't put them out of my mind. But when it's just worrying, things you could do nothing about, I will not entertain them. I will not let ruin a beautiful day or a wonderful hour with that. So that was the zero tolerance aspect. And I'm telling you, it's the most difficult thing I ever did. It's much more difficult than working out because you need to really, really collect yourself and focus and be determined, even though it seems that it's not working, but eventually it will. And controlling my mind was a big thing for me.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And something that you mentioned, which is really important, is that, pretty much multitasking is a myth, right? Like many people don't really understand that, right? Like you can't focus on two different things at the same time. Like it's just not possible. Like if you look at the science, it's just not possible, right? Like you have to stay focused on one. And if you do switch, you're going to switch back and forth, but now you're
Right.
going to compromise the quality of both the things that you're doing. Right. So you mentioned
Right.
that, okay, like you would switch the thoughts over to something, happy. And obviously you would kind of choose your happiest thoughts by going into your own life and looking, okay, what makes me the happiest? And then you would just kind of paint a really like a really vivid picture of that thought and a
Right.
journey as well, right? So to completely
Yes.
take your mind away from that. And then also you mentioned like math, like going down from 1000 to 991. Again, the main concept comes down to taking your mind away from those
Exactly.
dangerous
Whatever
negative
works.
thoughts.
But as long as you can keep
Yeah,
dragging
and
your
then you
mind
can't
back to
quit.
where you want it.
Exactly. And then obviously as well, you can't quit, right? Because so many people try it once or twice, and then if it's not as helpful as they want it to be, they just kind of stop it, right? So being persistent with it is also extremely important. Now, what if someone were to say, "Oh, hey, this is just like blind optimism. Like you're not being realistic. You're just, trying to escape and you're not in touch with reality." Like what would you tell to those people? Because I mean, obviously like people sometimes they have hard time with that, right? Like especially as you're getting older, it tends to be a little bit harder to kind of not be in touch with like the reality of the situation.
I'm all for being in touch in a reality you can affect,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But if you can't affect the reality you're in, then focus on the good parts of it, even though they might be very small, but focus on those because otherwise you are just basically saying to yourself, I choose to be miserable because my reality is miserable. Reality is never miserable. It could be mostly miserable, it could be largely miserable, but there'll always be a sliver of positive. You have a good friend. There's something you enjoy to watch on TV. There's a certain flavor of ice cream you're really into. But there's gonna be a sliver of positive. And if you can't change the negative, entertaining it, focusing on it, speaking of it, even to yourself or elsewhere, is just making you miserable. And this is your shot.
Yeah.
Take back control and make yourself as happy as possible, not unrealistically. I didn't tell myself, I'm going to live to 200. I'm not. But I'm going to live today
Yeah.
and I'm probably going to live tomorrow. And let's see what I want to do with that time. And let's see what I can do to enjoy it the most or make the most out of it or bring the most happiness I can to people I care about or to people I want to help because I have today and tomorrow. I don't have to think about what if I don't have the day after because I have today and tomorrow. There's always an upside. Focus on it. It'll make your life so much happier, even though there's so much dark you can always look at. But that's a choice, and I choose not to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.